This is BBC News. I'm Rita Chakrabarti. The headlines at 7. 3 people are reported dead and many injured after a van ran into crowds of people in the German city of Münster. Police say the driver of the vehicle killed himself at the scene.
The suspect shot himself in the vehicle. His identity is still unclear.
14 people are killed after a bus carrying a junior ice hockey team crashes in Western Canada. 300 extra police officers are deployed on the streets of London after 6 people were killed in the last 7 days across the capital. Also in the next hour, can Manchester City make Premier League history? The score is at the moment 3-2 to Manchester United with less than 20 minutes to go. And victory for English swimmer Adam Peaty at the Commonwealth Games in Australia. We'll have that and all the day's sporting action in Sports Day in half an hour on BBC News. Good evening and welcome to BBC News. 3 people have been killed in Western Germany after a van drove into pedestrians in the city of Münster. Around 30 people were injured, some are in a critical condition. The driver of the vehicle died after shooting himself. German media say the man had mental health problems and suggest he had no terrorist background. Our Berlin correspondent Jenny Hill reports.
In the historic heart of one of Germany's biggest university towns, a scene of horror. The old square was crowded, people enjoying the spring sunshine, when a van ploughed through what should be a pedestrianised zone. For those in its path, little chance to escape. This pavement cafe was full of people, eating, drinking, relaxing.
It was a small restaurant and the people are sitting outside and then the van crashed in the restaurant.
A major investigation is now underway. The driver, police say, killed himself after the crash. The scene still cordoned off after officers found what they describe as a suspicious object in the van.
The suspect shot himself in the vehicle. His identity is still unclear. There's some eyewitness accounts of other culprits possibly having fled the vehicle, but we're still investigating this and do not yet have an in-depth understanding of what happened.
The authorities have urged the public to avoid speculation. Too soon, they say, to establish a motive. There are suggestions the driver may have been a man with mental health problems. But what happened here bears a strong resemblance to the Berlin Christmas market attack of 2016. Jenny Hill, BBC News.
Well, our correspondent Caroline Davis is here with me. And Caroline, just bring us up to date with what we know about the gunman.
So at the moment, relatively little, but we are now hearing that they believe, that eyewitnesses believe that it is a German middle-aged man, as we heard in Jenny's report, potentially with a history of psychological problems, although we're waiting to hear more information about that. That's coming from German media outlets that are giving us that information at the moment. What we don't know is motive. We don't know who this person might be for certain, and we don't know why he might have done what he did.
So, speculation at the moment that this was not, in fact, a terror attack, given that this was a German national, or not, anyway, an Islamist terror attack. But Germany has, of course, been in that sort of situation before.
Of course, and it's obvious why people do jump to the conclusion that it might be a terrorist incident. We've seen plenty of incidents where vehicles have been used, driven into crowds of people. And of course, in Germany, in Berlin, in December 2016, there was the Christmas markets attack, which killed 12 people. Now, a lot of people would have combined that information, instantly thought this must be a terrorist attack, but we at the moment just don't know for certain what the motives behind this attack were. Interestingly, the German police in Münster have been tweeting about this and saying repeatedly, do not stir suspicion about this, do not speculate at the moment, we will tell you when we know.
OK, Caroline, more from you a little bit later. Thanks very much. Well, for more on this, we can speak now to Stephanie Bolzen, who's a journalist for Germany's Die Welt newspaper and joins us via webcam. Thanks very much indeed for joining us here on BBC News. A very difficult afternoon's events for people in Germany. How have the German media been reporting this? What have you been saying?
Well, there is a lot of speculation, as your colleague said before, about who is the killer, who's the man behind. There has now been breaking news on the German wires that not from officially, but security circles are confirming that it is a German national. And this is important in the context of the attack in Berlin at the end of 2016, when a Tunisian citizen drove a van into the Christmas market in Berlin, and he indeed was an Islamic terrorist. And of course, in Germany, as in other places in Europe and beyond, there's always the fear of Islamic terrorism. So speculation were high, and yeah, some parts of the German political parties have already tried to use this incident in Münster.
I was just going to ask you, actually, what sort of political response has there been?
Well, there has been one tweet by an MEP of the AfD, that's the Alternative für Deutschland. This is the right-wing anti-immigrant party that was very successful at the last election back in September 2017. And she has been tweeting just minutes or moments after that incident was on the news, "Wir schaffen das," which in German means "we will manage," and this is the very known, famous phrase by the Chancellor Angela Merkel, when at the start of the refugee crisis back in summer 2015, she said this phrase several times, "we will manage, wir schaffen das." And of course, this tweet by the AfD MEP is very cynical. She then had to send other tweets later on to say, oh, well, apparently it is not a refugee, it's not an Islamist. But, well, yeah, you just see that we have enough problems also with white German people who have mental illness. So that's a very, very sad and very cynical way of instrumentalizing what is for the city of Münster and beyond absolutely a tragic and terrible day.
OK. And Stephanie Bolzen, people here won't necessarily be familiar with the city of Münster. Tell us about the sort of place it is.
Oh, it's a very nice place in the north of North Rhine-Westphalia, pretty much in the, say, center-northern part of Germany. It has a very high quality of life. I think just recently it got the title of the most livable city in Germany, medium-sized, lots of students, pedestrian areas. There's a lot of these old, you would say, Tudor houses, German style. It is a very nice place. It has a beautiful Christmas market. People are going by bike everywhere. So this is also a bit like, why Münster? It doesn't have any symbol, political symbol beyond, some might say now, some peace that was brokered there in 1648. But it's not a politically important city in that sense. It is probably one of the most cozy and most peaceful and idyllic places you can find all over Germany.
Well, these are issues that people will be puzzling over for quite some time to come, I'm sure. Stephanie Bolzen, for the time being, thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Now here, the Mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, says the police should feel confident to stop and search people to combat the recent spike in violent crime. He said such powers could help make London safer if used in a targeted way. 300 extra officers have now been deployed after 6 people were killed in shootings and stabbings in the last 7 days. Here's Simon Jones.
Lives lost, families grieving, some living in fear. And the growing question, what can be done to tackle violent crime? With calls for the police to make more use of controversial powers to stop and search suspects for weapons. The number of searches has fallen dramatically in recent years amid fears that poorer areas and ethnic minority groups were being disproportionately targeted.
Look, when stop and search is used properly, it's an invaluable tool to the police, and what we want is more targeted, intelligence-led stop and search.
Hundreds of extra officers are on the streets of London this weekend, but some academics question whether using stop and search significantly reduces violent crime. The Metropolitan Police Commissioner, Cressida Dick, says she backs searches done in a way that is targeted and intelligence-led. In East London, there's some support.
This is the right time to do it. Seen too many kills.
People could feel targeted as well, you know.
that, you know, why am I being stopped rather than me or this guy or this woman or so on and so forth.
Let them stop me and search me. Let them stop even the girls, because the girls are also in the gangs.
Here in Hackney, flowers mark the spot where 18-year-old Israel Ogunshola lost his life this week. He was stabbed to death. Many here say they've had enough. They want an end to the violence, but there's recognition there may be no simple, quick fix. One former chief superintendent with the Met says much more needs to be done to prevent young people carrying weapons in the first place.
I think we need to be doing much more in schools, and certainly when I've spoken to parents of children who've been murdered, one thing they say, all of them, without exception, is that they want to see much more intervention at an earlier stage in schools.
As the grieving continues, the Mayor of London has invited the Home Secretary and all London's MPs to a knife crime summit next week to discuss what else can be done in the fight against violence that is ruining so many lives. Simon Jones, BBC News.
Well, a 17-year-old boy has appeared at Thames Magistrates Court charged with murdering a teenager featured there in Simon's report who was stabbed in East London. The victim, who's been named locally as 18-year-old Israel Ogunshola, was found with fatal wounds in Hackney on Wednesday. The 17-year-old will appear at the Old Bailey on Tuesday. The Russian embassy in London has requested a meeting with the Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson to discuss the Salisbury nerve agent attack, calling its current relationship with the Foreign Office utterly unsatisfactory. It comes as officials in Whitehall have said it's not certain that the former Russian agent Sergei Skripal will make a full recovery. Well, earlier our correspondent Catherine Stancheshin gave us this update from Salisbury.
This sort of tit-for-tat war of words seems to have sprung up today between the UK Foreign Office and the Russian embassy in the UK in the wake of this update on Sergei Skripal's condition. He was found poisoned on a bench just round the corner in the city of Salisbury 5 weeks ago tomorrow with his daughter Yulia, and of course that sparked this diplomatic row between the two countries. The Russian embassy requested a meeting with the UK Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson earlier on today, saying that communication has been unsatisfactory and saying they would like an update on this investigation in Salisbury as soon as possible. Well, the UK Foreign Office has responded to that, saying it's Russia that's been unsatisfactory. They failed to answer several key questions in this investigation, despite having 3 weeks to do so, and saying that the request for this meeting really is a diversionary tactic. Of course, Russia has denied having anything to do with this poisoning, saying that the UK has failed to provide any proof at all that it was the nerve agent Novichok involved. The UK government remains steadfast that it was Novichok, that points to just one culprit, which is Russia, and that it has the backing of its European friends and NATO allies. Of course, the prospect of the Skripals being able to tell their own story is what's putting extra pressure on this, because many thought they would never be able to do so.
Correspondent Catherine Stancheshin there. Now, 14 people have died after a bus carrying a junior ice hockey team collided with a lorry in Western Canada. Another 14 other passengers were injured in the crash in the rural province of Saskatchewan. The team were all aged between 21 and 16 years old. Our North America correspondent Chris Buckler reports.
Hand in hospital, teammates are turning to each other for support, all too aware that many of those they played alongside have been killed.
18 seconds to go on this Humboldt power play.
In rural Canada, ice hockey is a sport and a passion that unites. And in Humboldt, a community of just 6,000 people, their team, the Broncos, aren't just seen as stars, but as sons and neighbours.
There's a bit of shock and a bit of disbelief going on, a bit of thinking about how the community's going to handle this.
The team, many of them teenagers, were travelling to a playoff match in a nearby town when the bus they were on collided with a lorry. Instead of going to watch that Junior League game, their family spent the night in a church hall waiting for information.
I think this is a dark time tonight. This is a good thing that people come together in the time of need. They don't stay at home when they're feeling isolated and alone.
On Twitter, the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said, "I cannot imagine what these parents are going through. And my heart goes out to everyone affected by this terrible tragedy in the Humboldt community and beyond. Half of the people travelling on the bus are now known to have died. A huge loss in this one small part of Canada. Chris Buckler, BBC News.
Time for a look at the headlines now here on BBC News. 3 people have been killed and many injured after a van drives into crowds of people in the German city of Münster. The driver shot himself at the scene. 300 extra police officers are deployed across London after 6 people were killed in shooting and stabbings in the last week. As you heard, 14 people are killed after a bus carrying a junior ice hockey team collides with a lorry in Western Canada. Thousands of prisoners are being rated according to their chances of being involved in violence in an attempt to tackle safety in jails. Staff can then use the data to inform decisions, such as which wing an individual is placed in. The system is being piloted at 16 prisons in England and Wales. Here's our Home Affairs correspondent, Tom Simons.
The new system has been jokingly nicknamed I Predict a Riot by data experts. Each time an incident like this happens, it's logged by prison staff. The number-crunching software produces a score of each inmate's likelihood of becoming violent. As well as informing prison governors under pressure to maintain order, it could also be linked to the system of privileges, which reward prisoners for good behaviour. The data can map gang affiliations. It can also spot those at risk of self-harm. Violence in prison is growing. There were 28,000 assaults in the year to last September. That's up 12%. Self-harm is also up 12% to nearly 43,000 incidents. The Ministry of Justice says it will do whatever it can to help hard-pressed governors. It's not collecting more data than before, just using it in clever ways, and the government says monitoring prisoners is vital to protecting them. The plan is to roll out the system across England and Wales after talks with prison unions. Tom Simons, BBC News.
Holidaymakers are being warned about fraudsters who place false adverts on accommodation websites. Last year, nearly 5,000 travellers fell victim to such scams, which included fake airline tickets. Our business correspondent Nina Warhurst reports.
When Georgia was looking to take her boyfriend to Amsterdam, she thought she'd seen the perfect apartment online. After transferring more than £900, she realised there was no record of payment and no apartment.
Your heart just drops and it's like this panic just comes over you. It just completely takes over your body and it's like, what have I done?
And she's not the only one. Last year, Georgia was one of 4,700 holidaymakers who reported fraud, losing an average of £1,500. Fake flights are the most common trick, with fraudsters targeting peak periods.
Look at the statistics from the report. It shows a big spike around December. What does that say to you? It's people going home for Christmas. And that's certainly our experience from people phoning us saying just that. And they just something they've been looking forward to quite some time. It just isn't going to happen. It can be extremely disappointing.
Losing a holiday hurts. More than a tenth of those who made complaints said the impact was so severe they'd had to receive medical treatment or were at risk of bankruptcy. The advice for holidaymakers is to thoroughly research websites before booking and check they're part of a recognised trading body. Nina Warhurst, BBC News.
The Texas National Guard has begun deploying a team of 250 troops to the US border with Mexico. The state of Arizona is planning to deploy a further 150. President Trump wants up to 4,000 military personnel stationed on the border until his proposed wall is built. The Bollywood star Salman Khan has been released from jail after being granted bail by an Indian court. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison on Thursday after being found guilty of killing 2 rare black buck antelopes 20 years ago. Under the terms of his bail, Salman Khan has been ordered to pay around £500 and won't be able to leave India without the court's permission. Well, our correspondent Nitin Srivastava was outside the court in Jodhpur earlier today. He said fans of Salman Khan were celebrating the news.
There's been a sense of huge jubilation. Firecrackers have been burst outside the court premises by hundreds of fans of the Bollywood superstar Salman Khan. Ever since the news of him being granted bail came out of the court premises. This is the Sessions Court where the hearing has been on since the morning. the local authorities did not allow the superstar to come and attend the hearing in person because they feared it could become a law and order problem. As you can see right behind me, there are hundreds of fans, huge media presence out here to have a glimpse of the superstar's family which had come for the court hearing. Now that he's got bail, the authorities will go to the prison and seek an early release from him. This may be a temporary respite for Salman Khan, who is one of India's top superstars. But this surely is not a full respite because the case is still on and the hearing is set to resume very soon. Nitin Srivastava, BBC News, Jodhpur, India.